We live in a time of wonders. Look around at the screens that hold the sum of human knowledge, at the medicine that extends our years, at the systems that deliver safety, sustenance, and comfort to our doorsteps. By any material measure, we are the wealthiest, most secure generation in history, and yet, beneath this polished surface, a quieter, more pervasive crisis hums. A crisis not of the body, but of the spirit, a crisis of meaning. Why is it that, in this age of unparalleled advancement, we witness such a profound rise in despair, in alienation, in the diagnoses we cluster under the name of mental illness? The question itself is a doorway. To step through it is to leave behind simple explanations and to embark on a journey into the heart of the modern condition, a journey through the landscapes of the self, of society, and of the soul that feels increasingly homeless in the world it has built. Our story begins not with an answer, but with an observation. In the 19th century, as the wheels of industry accelerated and cities swelled, physicians began noting a significant increase in cases of what was then called lunacy, an increase largely comprised of a particular pattern of suffering we now term schizophrenia. This was not merely a medical discovery, it was a historical symptom. Something in the very fabric of human experience was shifting. One of the most profound shifts was the turn inward. For centuries, life's purpose was often dictated by external orders, divine decree, social hierarchy, tradition, the relentless demands of survival. But with modernity came a new focus, the individual self. We turned away from the search for objective, external blueprints for living, and instead turned the lens of awareness onto our own inner activity. This became the pervasive feature of a new kind of human experience. We became, in the words of sociologists, psychological man, a character type intent on the conquest of his own inner life. The value of the individual was exalted, and with it, the weight of individual choice. This newfound self-awareness blossomed alongside other great forces, the relentless bureaucratization of life, the calm reason of technology, the slow retreat of religious certainty, the reorganization of society around principles of efficiency and rational order. We were asked to live in two worlds simultaneously. One world celebrated our unique individuality, our freedom to define ourselves. The other demanded that we adapt, conform, and fit into the complex, often impersonal machinery of the modern world. The problem, the deep and aching fracture, arises when these two demands contradict one another. We feel the split within, the unique self yearning for expression, and the social self required for function. This inner division is the fertile ground of modern anguish. Some have argued that we have misnamed this anguish. Psychiatrist Thomas Schoch, in his provocative work The Myth of Mental Illness, challenged the very framework. He suggested that what we call mental illness is often not a disease in the medical sense, but a metaphor. It is a label we apply to patterns of behavior that disturb us, that offend our shared psychosocial or ethical norms. If you talk to God, you are praying, he wrote with piercing clarity. If God talks to you, you have schizophrenia. His point was not that suffering is unreal, but that categorizing it as an illness can be a way of hiding the true problem, the problem of how to live. To confront the problems in living is not a clinical failure. It is the central human task, and modern life has made this task uniquely dizzying. We are, as the existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre declared, condemned to be free. With the erosion of absolute guides, God, tradition, fixed social roles, we are thrust into the terrifying openness of our own autonomy. We must direct our own lives, and we must take responsibility for that direction. There is no ultimate refuge in another. no divine parent to shoulder the burden. We can ask for opinions, but the choice, ultimately, lies in us. This freedom is not a light, joyous thing. For many, it is a weight that induces vertigo. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard saw two paths of escape from this dizzying freedom, two forms of despair. One can get lost in the infinite, a state of paralysis, pondering infinite possibilities, but never committing to any act, any path, any identity. Or one can get lost in the finite, becoming a mere imitation, a number, a cipher in the crowd, swallowed by trivial obligations and devoid of any sense of personal value. This latter state he called finitude's despair. It is a state where one cannot imagine any alternate way of being. It is, as he described, to live dyingly, to be physically present but spiritually deceased, going through the motions of a life that feels utterly vacant. This vacancy finds its starkest expression in the mundane. The philosopher Albert Camus pictured it in the crushing rhythm of the everyday: rising, streetcar, 4 hours in the office or factory, meal, streetcar, 4 hours of work, meal, sleep, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday according to the same rhythm. For a time, we follow this path automatically, but then, one day, the why arises. Why this rhythm? Why this effort? Why anything? That moment of why, tinged with weariness and a strange, detached amazement, is the birth of the absurd. It is the realization that we are Sisyphus, condemned to push our boulder up the mountain, only to watch it roll back down, day after day. If our efforts cannot be connected to a satisfying why, the absurd curdles into nausea, an existential crisis where the act of continuing to exist itself requires a justification that feels perpetually out of reach. How did we arrive at this precipice? One of the most significant turning points was the Age of Enlightenment. In liberating the human mind from unquestioned dogma, it also undermined the foundations of meaning that society had relied upon for millennia. The religious worldview, which placed humanity within a cosmic story of divine purpose, began to recede. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche announced the most profound consequence of this shift: God is dead. He did not mean this as a celebration, but as a chilling diagnosis of a cultural catastrophe whose full implications were yet to be felt. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering, he wrote. It has not yet reached the ears of men. This event has now reached our ears. We are the generations living in the long shadow of that death. We are forced to face the terrifying question it leaves in its wake. Does existence have any meaning at all? The modern age is characterized, perhaps above all else, by a profound disorientation, a deep and pervasive not knowing of what to do with one's life. We have been left, as psychiatrist Viktor Frankl observed, in an existential vacuum. Frankl, who survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps, emerged with a profound insight. The primary force in human life is not the pursuit of pleasure, as Freud suggested, or the will to power, as Nietzsche proposed, but the will to meaning. He saw the existential vacuum, this unheard cry for meaning, as the root cause of much of modernity's psychological distress. Such widespread phenomena as depression, aggression, and addiction, he argued, are not understandable unless we recognize the existential vacuum underlying them. When life feels meaningless, all struggles become futile, and futility breeds despair in all its forms. Frankl's response was not to prescribe a meaning, but to reorient the person toward the question itself. The therapeutic task is to confront the question of meaning, to explore it with courage, and ultimately, to provide a positive answer through one's own living. Each man is questioned by life, Frankl concluded, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life he can only respond by being responsible. Meaning is not discovered in idle contemplation, but in responsible action, in the values we choose to embody, in the love we express, and in the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. But where does one find the strength for such a journey? The psychoanalyst Carl Jung and those who followed his insights point us toward a deeper, more ancient source, the realm of myth and symbol. Modern man, Jung suggested, is in desperate need of the hero's journey. This is not a call for grandiosity, but for the universal pattern of transformation seen in myths across the world. The hero is called from the ordinary world, faces trials and darkness, slays dragons, which are often internal, and returns with a treasure, a new level of consciousness, a hard-won insight to share with the community. This journey mirrors our psychological development. We begin in a state of dependency. Our early weaknesses balanced by guardians orphan our parents. Their role is to equip us for the arduous tasks of life. True maturity, however, begins only when we become independent, when we confront the world by ourselves and pass that initial test of self-reliance. The crisis of modernity is, in part, a stalling of this journey. We are granted the freedom of the hero without the cultural container of the myth, leaving us lost in the labyrinth, without a thread. Jung's work with those suffering from severe mental illness led him to a radical compassion. He asked, what actually takes place inside the mentally ill? He found that behind the terrifying symptoms of conditions like schizophrenia was often a profound, but distorted, search for meaning. He treated patients deemed hopeless and discovered that their psychosis was frequently a symbolic, if catastrophic, attempt to resolve an unbearable life story, a secret, a trauma, a rock against which the psyche had shattered. He once treated a young woman, catatonic and withdrawn, who believed she lived on the moon. Through painstaking care, he learned she had suffered abuse. Her retreat to the moon was not mere madness. It was a refuge. In the realm of fantasy, she was elevated, beautiful, and her life was rich with meaning, a stark contrast to the humiliation she felt on earth. Her psychosis was a complete alienation from a world that had wounded her, a plunge into cosmic distances. By telling Jung her story, she betrayed her solitary demon and reattached herself to an earthly human connection. For Jung, this revealed that within the chaos of the shattered mind lay a valid experience, a distorted attempt to solve a problem in living. The inner world, no matter how frightening, was rich with significance. This longing for a meaningful container for our lives points to something even more fundamental than individual psychology, our biological and social need to belong. Journalist Sebastian Junger, in his book Tribe, argues that humans have a deep, instinctual drive to be part of a small, interdependent group. For hundreds of thousands of years, we lived in tribes where survival depended on collaboration, where everyone played a necessary role, and where life, while physically demanding, was socially coherent. Studies suggest hunter-gatherers worked far fewer hours for subsistence than the average modern worker, and their time was deeply embedded in social reciprocity. Hunting, gathering, sharing by the fire. History provides a startling testament to the power of this tribal bond. During the colonial wars in North America, many European settlers taken captive by Native American tribes, when given the chance to return to civilization, refused. They chose to stay in the tribal society. The reverse, however, was almost unheard of. Tribesmen did not seek to flee to modern society. This suggests that the tribal way of life, for all its hardships, fulfilled profound human needs for belonging, purpose, and equality that modern society often neglects. We evolved for that interdependence. Yet, today, we can be surrounded by thousands of people in a city and feel utterly alone. We are wired to belong to a group where we feel valued by our contributions, but we live in a structure that often reduces us to economic units, consumers, or isolated competitors. The social bonds that characterize the human experience for millennia have been disrupted. Sociologist Emil Durkheim observed a paradoxical phenomenon. During times of collective crisis like war or natural disaster, rates of suicide and admissions to psychiatric hospitals often drop. Adversity, it seems, can produce pro-social behavior, pulling people out of their self-interest and uniting them toward a common purpose. It sends people back, however painfully, into a more ancient, communal way of being. Modernity, in its promise of comfort and individual autonomy, has inadvertently bred a deep sense of isolation and selfishness. We have gained independence, but lost community. We have gained choice, but lost shared purpose. Our genes are still those of tribal hunter-gatherers, living in an environment of unprecedented complexity, but profound social fragmentation. This mismatch is a core wound. Jung issued a solemn warning about the consequences of this disconnect. Modern man does not understand, he wrote, how much his rationalism has put him at the mercy of the psychic underworld. In our zeal to cleanse the world of superstition and irrationality, we have cut ourselves off from the numinous, from spiritual values, from our own primitive instincts. We have dissociated. We believe we control ourselves, but true self-control is a rare achievement. More often, parts of our psyche split off spontaneously, without our knowledge or consent, and operate as autonomous personalities. This is not civilization, but a primitive loss of soul wearing modern clothing. We see this dissociation everywhere, in the divided self of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, in the moods that possess us, in the unreasonable reactions we cannot explain, in the facts about ourselves we conveniently forget. The surface of our world seems rational, but a realistic look at the human mind reveals primitive traits still operating in the shadows, as if centuries of progress never had touched them. We feel isolated in the cosmos because we have lost our deep, participatory relationship with nature. When indigenous societies lose their spiritual values to modern impact, they often disintegrate not from lack of food, but from lack of meaning. As anthropologist Ernest Becker noted, a people who lose the feeling that their life is worthwhile may simply stop reproducing, or lie down and die beside streams full of fish. Food, he reminds us, is not the primary nourishment of man. So, where do we go from here? How do we heal this split within and without? The path is not backward, but inward and forward. Jung's prescription was not a regression to primitivism, but a courageous integration. To heal the split in the psyche, we must explore our unconscious. We must engage in self-reflection, attend to our dreams, and begin a dialogue with those autonomous parts of ourselves we have neglected or repressed. We must ask not only, what do I think, but also, what does the unconscious psyche think about me? Within this inner exploration, we find vital insights. We encounter the archetypes, the universal, primitive aspects of the original mind that we all share in the collective unconscious. These are not personal quirks, but deep, psychic patterns of the hero, the mother, the wise old man, the shadow. By engaging with them, we reconnect with a wisdom older than reason. We begin to see our personal struggles not as isolated pathologies, but as part of the eternal human drama of seeking wholeness. The journey toward meaning in the modern world is therefore a double journey. It is an outward journey of responsibility, of answering life's questions through our actions, our relationships, and our contributions to a community we must consciously rebuild. It is the hero's task of engaging with the world, and it is an inward journey of exploration, of descending into our own inner moonscapes to recover the lost, wounded, or exalted parts of ourselves we have exiled. It is the task of listening to the psyche, of reconciling the rational with the symbolic, the modern with the ancient within us. We stand at a unique crossroads, holding both the burden of our freedom and the ancient blueprint of our need for belonging. The crisis of meaning is not a sign of weakness, but a symptom of a deep, unmet need for a life that matters to ourselves, to a circle of others, and to the cosmos we sense but struggle to connect with. The world, Jung said, hangs on a thin thread, the psyche of man. We are the great danger, but we are also the only source of redemption. The answer to the existential vacuum will not be found in a pill, a new technology, or a return to dogmatic certainty. It will be forged in the quiet courage of the individual who chooses responsibility in the face of freedom, who seeks community in the face of isolation, and who dares to explore the rich, dark, and ultimately sacred terrain of their own inner world. We are all Sisyphus. The rock will always roll back down. The absurd is a given, but as Camus suggested, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. The happiness, the meaning, is not in reaching the summit, but in the conscious, dignified engagement with the push itself. It is in the sweat on our brow, the feel of the stone, the pause to look at the sky on the descent. It is in the inner transformation that occurs when we stop asking the rock to stay atop the mountain, and instead find purpose in the steadfastness of our own effort, and in the solidarity of knowing we are all, each in our own way, pushing our own boulders up the hill. The meaning you seek is not a distant treasure to be found, but a quality of attention to be cultivated. It is in the responsibility you take for your choices. It is in the tribe you nurture, however small. It is in the dream you write down upon waking, and the silent, respectful listening you offer to the stranger within. The modern labyrinth is not a prison if you carry a lantern. Let your search for meaning be that lantern, not to find a way out, but to illuminate the path beneath your feet, and to reveal, step by conscious step, that the journey itself is the home been seeking.